so excited to be here again. It is an absolute pleasure to get a chance to talk about the industry, what's happening in the world, and to really drill down into a lot of things that are on top of people's minds today. Matthew, thank you for joining me. This will be a really fun conversation. How are things in Chicago? How are you?
Oh, it's awesome. There's well, all things considered.
Yeah.
This is one of the first times that I've been around family. Like we're all dispersed, so to be able to be here with my brother and his 3-year-old and 1-year-old is awesome and scary all at the same time.
I can imagine, it's, I think that just around the country and around the world, everyone is so dying to open up everything because I think we've had a nice 3 months of family time. And I think it both was rejuvenating and then also shocking.
I'm sure. And how many do you have? One, two, one?
No.
Zero. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Oh, tough. Okay, let's start that over.
Yeah, it's I think that there's like I don't know. I think it's been wild times. I know that in New York, I'm in New York right now. I ended up getting quarantined out here. I live in Los Angeles usually, and it's been so fascinating to hear about retailers and brands starting to open back up right now. And what's been really fascinating, I think, has been the number of brands that are actually opting out and saying that they're going to be only sticking with e-com and like not opening back up their doors. So I'm wondering, what are you hearing out there, and what's the word on the street?
I don't know. I've been seeing most brands most brands have been focused on direct to consumer, so like being able to get the product in inventory, which I'm happy that we're able to touch on that. To be able to have the product in inventory is so important, but a lot of their factories have closed. So just seizing that opportunity right now, because we don't know when or if or to whatever degree the second wave will be.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I had the privilege of being able to speak to a number of retailers in the city of Coral Gables, funny enough. I've had a lot of great experiences working with their city government. And, what I've been hearing a lot is there's this huge return to custom and this huge return to personalization and how consumers are looking to engage. And just for everyone out there who's watching and listening right now, please feel free to jump in on chat. Today is really about how companies and brands are reopening and kind of ramping up capacity building. I think there are a lot of different ways in which we can start to think about that, but certainly if any of you guys out there have ideas or questions or wondering how to make those initial steps forward, Matthew and I will be happy to answer those questions and find a best solution to as many people's needs. But when I had this conversation with these retailers, it was so interesting because a lot of them are trying to figure out, how do I, bring back my team, and what does hiring start to look like? And I guess I'm wondering from your perspective and how you guys see brands, or even just internally, right? How are you guys looking, or how are you looking at people hiring back and kind of the return of the workforce?
Oh my gosh, there's just so much to think about. I feel like, it's interesting because we were working out of a co-working space, and then we just said, let's loosen up on that. Let's just meet up like twice or 3 times a week. And like we decided to be a fully remote team, probably at least a month or two before like everyone was quarantined. I just feel like it was tough. It was a tough decision because we had never done this before, but like now I find that it kind of pressures us to be able to be so much more organized, and with our communication and optimizing the time. It's just like, it's amazing. I feel like we're working super efficient right now, but I feel like it's jarring for any company.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, are there any, now that everyone's kind of forced to be globally distributed, and it's like, how do we start to regain a sense of like community within our organizations, even though we can't actually be together? How do we fake being together? Are there any best practices or ways in which you've been able to, are there ways in which you've been able to do that within your team where, a lot of these brands that are watching today are probably like, yeah, my design development person's in New York, I'm in, Milwaukee, I got a graphic designer in Los Angeles. Like, how do I manage these distributed teams? What are some things that you think could be really helpful for them?
I am the furthest thing from an expert on this, right? We've just been doing this for the past, 5-6 months or so. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we've just fallen into place using different tools like, Slack, of course, all the time. Communication, even like light communication on there, just keeps everyone just touching base with everybody. And I feel like between that and tools like Monday,
Matthew, I don't know if you froze or if I froze or there's some combination of freezing going on. It looks like I may have lost you for a moment. Please come back and join me when you can. We'll kind of continue the conversation until we get Matthew back on here. Gina, you believe in creating your lifestyle brand and need that brand DNA. I know, loving and living inclusivity. Amazing. That's really fantastic. Thank you for your comments. I do believe that it is a really important time for you guys, as piggybacking off of our conversation the other week. We were talking about, how do you build the brand? What are the foundations and fundamental steps? And one of the things that I had really espoused was the need for a brand DNA and really how important a brand DNA is to the overall, growth and stability of a brand and creating that North Star. So Gina, looking forward to hearing from you when you decide to kind of get back on there. Okay, I think I've got Matthew again. All right, let me bring you back on, Matthew. Super.
All right.
You back?
Switched over to my phone. That's another thing that you have to deal with all the time. Just always cutting out. But turn my phone hotspot on, so we should be good.
Amazing. Not a problem. Happens to me, unfortunately, more times than I like to admit. We're getting a couple of comments that are coming in. Someone saying here, interesting to hear that retailers are only going e-commerce. It is very interesting. The thing that I've been following so closely is, how do we look at the concept of like real estate and space, and what will it actually look like for us to be in retail yet again, and what was that brand experience going to look like?
Yeah, I sold to big box retailers a couple of times, and it just seemed like the worst experience ever. It was just brutal. Because you feel like you work with these smaller independent boutiques because you want to be able to scale up to be able to get your product into the big box stores. But I really found that to be it let me down. It let me down. It let me down on the hopes of like what that would do for my business. Because a lot of people just feel like that will make them a serious business once they get carried by, a large, historically reputable brand, right?
Yeah. It's I feel like the entire industry is being turned on its head right now in terms of how we look at things from our supply chain to, what our definitions of success look like in the market.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. But I've been seeing some amazing solutions coming out there just with adoption of like these tools for startups to use that connect them. There's so many different tools coming out right now. And there's a reason why, who's the major? Shopify. Their stock has gone up so much. It's like everybody's trying to purchase those accounts even before they ever have a product. I feel like it makes them feel like they have something like tangible now that they can build off of, right?
Of course. I mean, it's I think what's so interesting is, I forgot what the stat was. It was something like, there were like 64%, 64% increase in, URLs. And my biggest fear is like, when's the internet graveyard going to hit? post pandemic, because we all know that like without the right execution, without the right planning and development, there are all so many or too many brands out there that just say, hey, I'm going to launch and I'm going to do this. And hey, I've got 3 months on my hands, right? Like I'm furloughed. I'm going to start a business. And then like, oh my gosh. And then maybe they get their job back and there goes that idea. And now you've got thousands of new URLs that have been taken.
Yeah. This is my Embark.live is my 5th company that I've started, and I found that like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially that first company out, it's an exercise of ego. I feel like it's just a matter of how much do I want to be out there, especially when it's an apparel brand. Like I definitely knew I didn't want to be one of those people that use their name. I feel like it just didn't have that sort of vibe, but it took me at least my second company to really develop that empathy for the consumer that I was actually building for.
That's
I don't know if you found that to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like, so it's interesting. I've spent the last 7-8 years working exclusively with startups, and it's now gotten to the point where I can have a call with someone and be able to tell within 10 minutes if I think that if that person is going to be successful. And what's interesting is it has nothing to do with the things that most people think it does, and everything to do with the way someone communicates and how they think. And okay. It's a very interesting process. So when I like talk to people now, it's like it's very easy for me. In fact, the other day I spoke with someone and they said, "Yeah, you spoke to me 3 years ago in a 15-minute conversation and was like, why are you doing this business? I don't think you should do this." And then she and then she called. She's like, "Yeah, you were right. I shouldn't have done it." And now I'm doing something else. So, I think there's a certain kind of founder personality. And I think that I tell most people, if you're an entrepreneur, it's a curse and you will likely always be an entrepreneur, and your first business is never your last business. And that, I think, is something that most people do not get.
Definitely. And it's sometimes you just have to know. I mean, I think that there's something to be said about like always pushing and being able to go past everybody's no. But I think there's also times of reflection that you have to have, and understanding at those different milestones. It's like I always question myself whenever I get to the next level or to the next level of success, that hit that next milestone, just kind of like do inventory, like on like, all right, I'm good. It's like, what am I looking at right now? Like, what was the price to get to where I got right now? And then what's the price to get to the next level?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to take this question here from JB. He is asking us, I'm in the foundation mode of my company. I have a new water apparel utility patent. Ooh, patents. And envision having custom fabrics made for my products. Trying to figure out if building my own brand versus licensing my patent idea. Any thoughts, pros and cons? All right, Matthew, take it away. How do you feel about patents? How do you feel about licensing? What on earth should this guy do? Or gal do? What should JB do?
Okay, in my humble opinion, I think I haven't dealt with patents that much. I've been in the design space. I thought about protecting my ideas, and as far as protecting design ideas, just didn't feel like it was even worth the time. And a lot of my professors, back at Pratt, were basically telling me your best defense is running as quickly as you can. You just have to get out there so that, you're the first person, putting the product out there. And it's true. It's I feel like, I don't know. So it's just I never looked for anything that had any major utility. I wanted to always develop consumer products, but that seems like it's a little bit more innovative. I'll just say it I think material wise than where I was going with. I was always, flirting with design and the vision of how things could look. It was only until more recently I started thinking about materials as deeply as this guy is. But I think that I'm going to pass it back because I think that it's. I usually don't work with patents because I just want to get the product out there. And then you also have to defend yourself against any major, like,
Sure.
are you going to fight it? Is the issue. And most of the time, entrepreneurs have better places to spend their money because these big brands will just, all right, we'll sit and wait. And we have these lawyers on payroll already. So let's see how long this goes. There's probably countless designers that you know of that have gotten their designs knocked off, right?
Absolutely.
I'm just assuming that.
I mean, absolutely. I'd also say to your point about having those lawyers on staff. I mean, if you take a look at even just what happened with the PPP loan, obviously it was all of the bigger guys who were ready to go, who had their accountants, their lawyers, everyone ready to go after those dollars that ended up clearing out finances and resources for smaller business owners. And having the capacity to have those teams ready to go, definitely hard to do when you're a small business owner, and there aren't as many resources, or aren't as many things that you can do. So I couldn't agree with you more. On the notion of what to do, patents, licensing, all of that. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just going to come out and say that, I don't know if it's. I don't know if it's worth it.
Sometimes you also have to question whether you want. You have to question who you're. You don't want to learn how to play poker at the table. So asking a lawyer if they can do the paperwork for you is not necessarily the question, because they'll spend time doing whatever you need them to. But as expensive as lawyers can be, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'd also say that, and JB, your question about, building your own brand, licensing, I think for me, the biggest question that I ask people is, how long do you want to do this for, and what's the end game? Mm-hmm. And I think that when we look at every individual's end game, they're all different. If you build a brand, are you building a brand because you want to sell the brand? Are you building a brand because you want to be the owner of it and keep it small? Are you wanting to do licensing? But when you think about, so there are a few things around licensing that I think are really important. If you're not Disney, it takes a long time to convince somebody that your brand or that what you're doing is actually worthwhile for them to pay you. It's not easy if you say, hey, I have this, I was actually speaking to last year, these pretty well-known, these two women, very well-known, wanted to go into licensing. And they had asked me about turning their product or kind of creating that type of brand. And I said, well, when you start to go into licensing, you have zero control over the distribution. You have zero control over, the kinds of products that they make. Certainly you have to approve things and you can approve them, but it's like you don't know where that product is ultimately going to end up. And your control over it, I think, is very limited. When you do have, and I think this is a great point that Gina made here, which is, if you think you have a Spanx, then it's worth a serious consultation with a patent attorney. And I couldn't agree more. But I think at the end of the day, it's, what is the end game, and how much money and time do you want to spend in this? And whatever it is you want to build, it's going to take your resources to get there.
That was perfect. This is the reason why I wanted to go on air with you, and why I thought that this would be a great conversation, because I was arriving at that place. I was saying, like, if you're doing a patent and you're trying to take it to a large company to try to sell it to them, it's the amount of effort that you're going to have to take to try to prove that out and navigate through the system till you get to the right person, and then know that there's a whole food chain that you have to deal with. The amount of effort that it takes there, and you might not even know the value of the product because you didn't develop it and try to test the market for it. I feel like if you have the time, if you have the money, it might be a good idea to develop a few samples and see what the market response is to it. Because how are you to have any idea as to what the value of it is for? I feel like then you're just going to be bucking against, your stars, and like they're just down low, like, I'll give you $1,000 for it, right?
Totally, totally. I think it's also like, and it's so funny. I was reading the other day, someone asked a question. It was like, how do I make sure angel investors don't run off with my ideas? And someone who's an angel investor wrote back and said, most angel investors are too lazy to go and run off with your ideas, and that's why they are angel investors, because they don't want to actually, invest and spend the time to build it. And I would say, similarly, when you have a brand, oftentimes people really rush to the, NDA, and what I have is so valuable or so important. And sometimes, guys, it's like, it's not exactly just having the right idea. It's having the capital, the time, the right people to pull it off. There are a lot of other factors and components that are involved in success. And I'm sure you can really speak to this, Matthew, outside of just like, I have this cool idea and it's all mine because I dreamt of it. Definitely.
Yeah, that's consistent with what I've seen as the journey.
It takes a lot, and I think what's so fascinating is we kind of circle this conversation back to the notion of like capacity building and kind of growing in these last 3 months. I've seen a number of really amazing pivots and brands who have said, hey, like I am now interested in getting into this other space. So I just launched an auxiliary diffusion line during this time, or I'm looking at new revenue streams. And I think the most challenging thing for a lot of the brands out there today who are listening and wondering, well, what does this mean for my business, or how do I, think about that? It's factories are reopening, right? It's like things are starting. And unfortunately, what we're also seeing is as things are restarting, you're going to see a new wave of COVID, right? It's like, that's kind of what we've been seeing, that things start to reopen, people are going to get sick again. And what I think is really fascinating about that is I don't think that cycle, right, is actually ever going to break until there's some sort of vaccine, or until we somehow get to, this large scale, I'm trying to forget the word.
The herd immunity.
Exactly. That's everyone's head. The herd immunity. So we're all a bunch of cows and we're all kind of, and we're all trying to become immune.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting, like I was thinking about that earlier today, just like, because it's been a minute since I've been in the factory and been producing on that like supply chain side. But just thinking like, yeah, as a startup, you have to be thinking about where you can get, especially right now, you have to kind of strike when you have that window to be able to build up some inventory to be able to move, if you know that product is actually moving and inventory is an issue. But even if you do, like how would you even think about like inventory on a new product that you're creating?
It's a great question. So whenever I think about launching a new product, I always flip the investment where most people would consider investing. So most people go, I have this product, I have $25,000 to launch this new product. I can either put, which is very low, but let's say, I can put it in inventory, I can put it in marketing, I need to put it in all of these things. More often than not, we overinvest in product and underinvest in brand awareness and marketing. And so I normally would tell anybody, you take whatever number you thought you were going to put into inventory, and you flip it with your marketing budget, and you spend more money per unit to get less inventory. So your cost of goods might be kind of crappy. You get less inventory, you spend a little bit more money, and you hedge your investment on the marketing in order to get the brand awareness to then help indicate if you need to make more. And people always wonder, like, well, I'm not going to get as good of a costing on this product because I'm only going to order 50 units instead of 300 units. And I'm like, yeah, but would you rather have 50 units that you spent a little bit more per piece to test it than 300 pieces that you got cheaper, but now you're sitting on all this inventory?
Yeah, that's tough. I still have watches in inventory. Yeah, that's one day I'm going to get rid of them. But that's a really interesting path just to take on that, because that was probably my one of the many early mistakes that I made in having a watch company, was that I spent like well over 70%, maybe 75% of the startup capital that I had on inventory. So being able to make a meaningful investment in sales and marketing was just one of the major. Happy that I recovered from that. If you're an entrepreneur for long enough, you've had a near-death experience. You've had several probably of the business, right? So let's start sharing some war stories on that.
Yeah, exactly. The horror stories. All right, JB coming back in here with another question. How do you communicate having low inventory to consumers, since everybody wants instant gratification? Will I lose customers for long waits? So what's so interesting here is you're actually going under the assumption, this question assumes that people are going to want your product when we actually have no idea. And the question assumes that people won't wait for things, which we actually know is not true. People wait for things all the time. I have to tell you, I one time spent like $50 on something on like Indiegogo that took 1.5 years to get to me.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So, customers do wait. And, I have to say the thing that is not good to do is to just run a business off of pre-selling and not actually have the proper lead time for production. I think that is, that I don't think actually helps you at all. I mean, you get a chance to read demand, but if you don't have the product to ship, you actually might lose people early on. So I would much rather see a sold out button than a pre-sale button.
Yeah, these are gems. These are gems. I'm not even going to touch that. I feel like that was complete.
Yes. Score one for the New York team. But I think, I think that these questions of like, how do we launch brands? How do we, communicate? How do we educate ourselves enough to know these things? I mean, obviously platforms like Embark are so needed in the industry as we start to ask ourselves, how do we educate ourselves on things we don't know? And, that was one of the core, people ask me all the time, why did you start scaling retail? And I said, well, I wanted to be the Accenture/McKinsey for small businesses. How do you kind of unveil the black box of things and kind of help people understand and be strategic when maybe they don't have the budget of a Chevron or of a Macy's to be able to do so. So what are people, I guess, going to be able to, what can they expect from the platform, and what can they expect in terms of education?
Yeah, I think that this is digital what co-working always was supposed to be, which I feel like most of the time ends up being co-renting or cohabitating. Mm-hmm. Being able to touch base with other people that have expertise in specific categories, from marketing to sales. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we need support, and you can only go as far as like your best, you always want smarter people, and people that have expertise in specific areas at like arm's reach, so that you can, when you have an issue, which you're always going to be facing some issue because you're trying to grow. So you're always going to be facing those growing pains. So sometimes you need an accountant, but I want to make sure that who is this person, and can they demonstrate their expertise as far as like, have you had experience with startups? Or are you just a generic, have you worked in only corporates? Because I think that sort of stuff matters. So It's about matchmaking those types of variables, right? Because if you're on something like, and no disrespect to them, LinkedIn, because I certainly have a premium profile on there, that's where everybody is. I just feel like one static profile versus another, I really want to be able to hear you talk and how you think about the industry today, and how you think about how you best plug into startups, right? Specifically for us.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that there is, the thing that, I mean, it's lucky for me because I love being on camera and I love talking. So anyone who knows me is like, oh yeah, Shama, she can just like talk and talk and talk. And maybe I was a TV broadcaster in one of my last lives, but
we're lucky to have you. We're lucky to have you on board.
Thank you, Matthew. Just to kind of wrap things up, guys, as we move into back to reopenings, as we really start to think about, what's going to happen if there's a new outbreak, if things, come back, they go forward. As of now, it seems like there, is a good 12 to 18 month horizon on when we think we might get a vaccine. And, that number, I think, once we have more information around that, I think is ultimately going to be the big driver. We saw the other day a historical thing. Stock markets went way high. Today, things are going down. I mean, look, we're still on the roller coaster. Things are not in the clear yet. And all we can do is keep our cool, stay strategic, and make decisions that are going to be the best for ourselves and for our businesses. And that means having a lot of conversations, absorbing a lot of information, not rushing to make decisions, because right now there's little you can do externally as things are opening up. But there's a lot that you can do internally. And there's a lot that you can do to build your business, to educate yourself, and to hire the right talent in order to do so. Because the moment things open up, your priority, right, on someone's list is going to drop because you didn't take the time during this downtime to make those connections and be able to establish those relationships. So Matthew, any parting words from you on how you think these brands out here today should be approaching and thinking about these next few months?
I think that we just have to be super nimble right now and just be thinking about how we can operate in these times, because we just don't know when they're going to go away. And I feel like you can't afford, I mean, some businesses you can't help but, if you have brick and mortar and it's the services, but if you have a product, I would think, how can I get my product into consumers' hands right now? Let's not just wait until things open up. Right? Always be keeping in touch with your consumer base and somehow just keeping that social connective tissue moving.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Matthew. Thanks for your time, your energy, your spirit. Thanks for spending some time talking to me about all things crazy in retail. It's a pleasure. And everyone out there, please tune in, Embark Live. Gosh, you guys have been doing such amazing programming and content. You can certainly come back and find me again next week, so long as you guys keep having me. But until then, thank you, Matthew.
You're killing it. We'll see you next week.
All right, bye.